Hey everybody, welcome to Oh God, what are you watching? My name is Cody Lang. My pronouns are they, them. I have a new guest today and I will let him introduce himself. So, hey!
Hi, I'm Jose Gallegos. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Pisces. I'm
Mm,
also generally a nightmare. So
mm.
yeah, that's just a little bit of me. Actually, I am a film lover. I collect movie posters, have about over 750 of them. Also went to library school so I can become a film archivist one day.
That is fantastic. I saw that you were putting away your posters though. What's that about?
So there comes a point in my life where I just start like decluttering and like I was just looking at my walls and I was like, you know what? I should start archiving and like actually have wall space and maybe one day open the door so you can see sunshine because I have blackout curtains and this place is a cave when the
Oh
lights
my
are.
God. That's not bad though. That's great.
It's not, but but at the same time, it's just like maybe I should see human contact because literally when I exit that door, it is just like it's like that meme of Adina on AbFab when she just opens the window and is like blinded by the light.
Yes. That's great. Good. So like what kind of what film directors have you like really kind of attached yourself to, or some that maybe inspired you? Also, I think if you're okay with it, you should show some tattoos that you have because I know that you have some
My
exciting work. Yes,
my
as
I don't
awkward
know
as
how
possible.
to
Yeah.
position myself. So,
Yeah.
starting with the tattoos, I just have a lot of film related tattoos. So, also got my chest done. So, I
Yeah.
have a bunch of my favorite directors all over my chest. If you can see the giant Krzysztof Kieslowski on here,
Yep.
love that man. So, I'd say Kieslowski had a big influence on me. Agnes Varda, Pedro Almodovar, John Cassavetes, more recent directors, Xavier Dolan, Andrew Hay, um, even Greta Gerwig. I'm curious to see the trajectory of her career because Lady Bird was great. Little Women was, it was there.
The sophomore feature. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm definitely curious what this Barbie movie is going to turn into.
See, yeah, that's the thing. It's like I'm not a Greta Gerwig fan, but I am very curious to see where her career goes, especially after taking on Barbie and then seeing all the pictures and stuff. And I'm like, what direction is she going with this? And I hate that we have seen so much just because I didn't want to know anything, and now I've just like seen so much at this point, and I'm like, I kind of want it to be a surprise. So I'm very curious to see where she goes with it. But
We live in the age of digital surveillance.
I
Nothing can
know.
get by anybody.
I know it's a mess, but so you live out in LA, right?
Yep, I
Oh,
live. So, fun thing about LA, if anybody asks you what part of LA you're from, they generally are trying to see if you're lying and if you mean you live in LA County or LA proper.
yeah.
I live in LA proper. I'm not
Oh,
a person that like lives in Long Beach and says that I'm from LA. I actually live in LA. I live in
okay.
Koreatown, which is like Eastern LA.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Any like weird I would say like because you're surrounded by like a lot of Hollywood stuff. Have you had any kind of like really crazy experiences out there? Anything memorable?
There are a lot of memorable things. The one that I can say is when I started my undergrad in 2007, my friend and I, who I had just met, he had moved from Ohio to come to school. We went to go see George Romero's, I think it was like Land of the Dead or Diary of the Dead, one of those that came out.
Yeah.
And so we were driving to the Egyptian theater, and all of a sudden, my friend like almost didn't brake and almost hit this guy with a cowboy hat on. And I just started laughing. I was like, "You almost hit Robert Rodriguez," and we just laughed. And then when we got there, we realized that he did almost hit Robert Rodriguez. So
Oh my God. Well, glad no one died. That's
nobody
great.
died. No.
Um, we are going to discuss two very different movies, but both outrageous in their own ways. We'll be discussing Persona by Ingmar Bergman, one of my favorite directors, and Mondo Trasho by John Waters, famous queer, crazy exciting filmmaker. And I guess we'll start with Persona first. So what is, before we get into like that specific one, what is your relationship with Ingmar Bergman, and when did y'all start dating?
So we started dating when I was, I'm gonna say 16 or 17, because I had heard of him, but at that time I was really poor and only had dial-up internet, so it took me like forever to research movies.
Mm.
But we had a Hollywood Video right down the street from us that was closing down. So whenever my mom wasn't at home, I would walk to the store that was like maybe like a 10-minute walk. And I would just buy a bunch of movies and like secretly hide them under my bed because I didn't want my mom knowing that I went out.
I'm an artist. I'm sorry. Yes. Great.
So I bought Seventh Seal.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Got Sawdust and Tinsel, Summer with Monica. And then once I went to undergrad, that's when it really started exploding, because that's when more of his films were becoming available.
Yeah.
So just took a deep dive on him. And I would say that of all of his films, my favorite is Cries and Whispers, because, you know, I just relate to a movie that starts off with "It is Monday and I am in pain."
I know, I post that every now and again too, because I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Which is funny because that movie, the first time I watched that, I was I think 18 or 19, and I was like, I don't get it. This is fucking stupid. And then when I got older, I was like, I'm gonna revisit it. And so I ended up watching it, sorry everyone, on my phone at the laundromat, and fucking sobbed. I was like, this is so beautiful. So, you know, it's great to revisit things because sometimes your perspective changes and stuff like that. But I had also watched other films, and the reason I got into Ingmar Bergman, which is embarrassing, I used to watch a lot of Will and Grace as a baby gay, and there was like an episode specifically where they were like, I just rented a bunch of Bergman films, and I was like, what is that? I got to see what this like gay culture is. Not really. I wouldn't really classify that as something part of like gay culture, except like maybe Persona has a little bit of you know, homoeroticism in it. But it kind of goes away once you, I guess, if you're on the same kind of idea of what the story's about, it kind of goes off. But yeah, that's I started with I think Seventh Seal might have been the first one I watched, and I was like, oh, okay, this is neat. And then I watched Persona, and Persona was one of those films that I think I saw it at the right time, because I had never seen anything like it. I was very much into like strictly like narrative features, and you know, I was like watching fucked up stuff, and then I got to this and it was very off the wall crazy. I was not prepared for it, and I was just like, oh, this is, film can do a lot more than what I was aware of. So then I started getting a little bit more adventurous, but I think this was like what propelled me into looking into more experimental things, which I would say this is probably one of his more experimental features. Would you agree? Or
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that tying it to the other movie, John Waters has notoriously said that like he and Divine and his friends would drop acid or take a bunch of drugs and go watch some Bergmans. So
I can't imagine. I haven't done acid, but even just like being high from like smoking weed and watching Bergman, I'm like, okay, it's a full-blown crazy emotional mental experience. So
I mean, imagine watching Hour of the Wolf when all that stuff is going on while being some kind of hallucinogenic.
I can't, because I remember when I watched that the moment when the guy is crawling on the roof scared the shit out of me, and I was not prepared for that. And even like the dead kid like trying to, you know, fight with the father. But very strange movie, but also one I would recommend. It's one of my favorites. But if you, okay, so we're going to start with Persona, which is a very short movie. It's about like 80-85 minutes. It's really quick. If you could give some sort of like basic, very basic description without going into like an over analyzing of like what it might be, what would you say? Like if someone's like, what's Persona about?
Okay, so my basic description would be Sigmund Freud got a camera and then filmed a bunch of images. What what essentially the movie is, from what you can gather of a plot, is that there was this actress named Alma who had essentially a nervous breakdown on stage, and she has a nurse that takes her to an island to care for her, and just weird stuff starts transpiring during their stay on that island. But yeah,
Yes.
it's just one of those movies that's just so rich in imagery that people have a million and one theories about what the hell is going on.
Yes, and it's really fun because I've seen it many times, and then I watched it. I like rewatched it again just because I wanted to make sure I had it fresh in my mind yesterday. And I watched it with my roommate, and he had like a different kind of idea about certain things too. And I was like, oh, that's so great because I love to hear just like how other people perceive it, because when I like first watched it too, I was just like, where the fuck did what's her name go at the end? I was like, because we just see, also spoilers, everyone should know this by now. But like I had no concept of just like really what happened, so I started reading about it, and I was like, oh, well, these other theories I'm reading about kind of make sense. So then I like rewatched it, and then with having that kind of perspective in my mind, I was like, okay, a lot of different things are starting to point out or stick out a little bit more. And then there's still things now that I'm, still wildly confused about, which the film begins with just kind of an assortment of Christian imagery, with like, a goat being slaughtered, or not a goat, a sheep, and someone getting crucified. You see the spider, which, nope, Bergman ends up, I was like, Tarkovsky, my other boo, the other religious boo I have. It's weird because I don't really see where those things kind of lead into it. And then there's like stuff that you see like a flash of a penis, and you see like all these other little things, like little cartoon strips and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you find out about this woman who is now completely silent, not talking to anybody, having a nervous breakdown, and this nurse who is trying to take care of her. But then this nurse kind of sees it as an opportunity to almost relieve herself, do some trauma dumping onto this poor woman who can't respond. So once, and it's a thing where she feels like she's finally being heard. So how do you okay, so first, it's hard to dive into this fully, but where do you see, what is your perception of the story overall? If you had to kind of pinpoint something that you at least kind of follow it a certain way, what would you say?
Well, I'm more of the ilk that, like, I understand that some symbols have symbolic meaning, and sometimes, like, having gone to film school twice in my life, sometimes you just get tired of meaning.
Yes.
And you're like, look, the cigar is just a cigar. It's not a penis. It's not it's not anything. It's just a man smoking a cigar. But like, having said that, like, I do think that, especially with Bergman and his symbolism, that it is rich in meaning. What that meaning is sometimes elusive, because not that he doesn't explain it, but that sometimes he's of the camp of like a David Lynch or a Louis Buñuel, where it's just like they know what their interpretation is, and they just kind of want to open it up to other people to have their own meaning and experience with it. And with this film, if I remember correctly, I think it was supposed to originally be called like Cinematograph or something that's just related to just, it's a series of images.
Yeah.
Sometimes the meaning that we make is in the juxtaposition of images and how they're placed to one another. So one of the times that I had to watch it was for a classical film theory class. And the teacher loved me because I had just read a book called Screening Modernism, where they overly explained everything about like nihilism and existentialism and in relation to this movie.
Yeah.
And the one part that I poked out was when Alma, the actress, is in the hospital and she just keeps on looking at a TV image of a monk that is burning himself alive.
Yeah.
And you just keep on seeing this juxtaposition of her in horror looking at this image and then the image that's being shown. And the explanation that I gave for it was like, at that point we were looking at the mirror stage and all this Lacanian theory, and I was just like, well, if we're to understand that like this concept of self comes from the images that are presented to yourself, where you just kind of look at the boundaries of yourself in a mirror, then she's having a one-to-one correlation with the monk who's burning alive, and she's having this visceral experience. And the professor was just like, oh my God, 10 out of 10, no notes, amazing explanation. And I like, it doesn't mean that that's the end all be all, but there is something visceral that's going on when you juxtapose an image of a woman that's standing frightened in a corner with an image of a monk on TV burning himself alive. Like the meaning that the encode that Bergman put into it might be different than the decode that I get out of it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's like,
well, that's what's
explanation.
And it's also interesting because you see that at the very beginning, and then later on in the film, she's in bed at this beach house and she's looking at a picture of this like little boy who has like a gun to his head, and she's just kind of focusing on it. But from what I remember, there's less horror in her face during that, and there's almost just kind of like it's a weird thing where it just kind of seems like she's succumbed to these like horrific feelings or just like the horrors of the world in a way. And it's a very strange thing to see how she's changed along the way. But you even see that with the characters and how they have like power shifts with each other as they're spending time with each other. So you see them gradually, both of them change along the way, which I think is also interesting. And like, okay, so just going back, the two women, they go to this beach house, and Elizabeth, the actress, she is not right.
Wait, yeah. Is it? Yeah, she's Elizabeth. Yes. I got it wrong. So
and Alma's the nurse. Yeah.
Okay.
Nurse Alma, who is Bibi Anderson, who is sexy as hell, and Liv Ullmann, who is also fucking stunning. Two beautiful human beings. And it starts with, you know, Alma kind of doing her little trauma dump, being like, oh, back in the day I did this, and blah, 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 and just like won't shut up. And you know, Elizabeth just kind of sitting there like not really responding or anything, just kind of like letting her speak. And you find out later, well, let's see, Alma ends up taking a letter from Elizabeth to like mail it out, but of course she's curious because she leaves it open and she reads it and realizes that Elizabeth has been almost studying her and starts to feel like she is being used as a joke, and is, you know, is deeply insecure after this, where she was like kind of felt secure and felt like she finally had someone to talk to and things are going okay, and very much had like this true sense of self. And then things start to twist and their relationship starts to twist a bit, and she calls her out on it and starts getting very aggressive. And then I think, you know, Liv Ullmann's character Elizabeth starts to see just how much, you know, that could have hurt her, and you see their feelings switch and kind of like cross over. And for me, I know it's kind of jumping around, but the two of them for me end up being, you know, the same person. It's very much two different sides of this, you know, same coin in a way. And whether that is a reflection on maybe whoever is the main person, their younger self kind of dealing with their older self, and how they've kind of switched along the way based on some traumatic event that happened, which I think was either she had the child or she had the abortion, or there's all these different things that could lead to different explanations. So I was curious okay. It's so difficult trying to stay on a track with this, but I'm curious, do you think, okay, so you think that the two of them are also possibly of the same person, almost kind of having a internal battle with each other, or do you have any kind of other insight?
Well, I think it depends on your perspective of who the central character of the film is. And sometimes some people will argue that the little boy is the central character because we're watching this through his perspective on the projected screen. But in terms of the characters themselves, what's interesting about their relationship is that it is weirdly hierarchical and shifting, but a lot of it plays out like a therapy session
Yeah.
where Elizabeth is just kind of this blank wall, doesn't really react, doesn't do much else. And so the power shift dynamic that happens is essentially what you were talking about when she realizes that, like, it's not a friendship per se, it's more a working relationship. And when she sees those words written out, kind of judging her, then it becomes a more hostile, like hostile in quotes, because it gets into really weird territory.
Yeah.
But like, I've also seen explanations that like they're lesbian vampires that
Wait.
well, because there's that one scene when she like I forget if she scratches herself or something happens and she starts bleeding, and I
Oh,
think Elizabeth starts like
yeah, sucking the blood. Yeah.
there are a lot of wild.
I feel like that's the only time where it would be like they're lesbian vampires. Otherwise, it's like, and then she's like, staring at her neck and smelling her and like, sees the pulse and stuff. But
But there's so much provocative imagery in there that
yeah,
you don't really have your bearings, and then on top of it, Bergman keeps on reminding you that it is a film, so he'll have like
yeah,
the film break in the middle of the movie to remind you that like this is a construction, or he'll have these surreal dream sequences where they're literally just in like a foggy room touching each other's hair.
yeah,
But it constantly confuses you because you don't it's similar to like Three Women or Mulholland Drive, where you don't really know where the waking state is, what
yeah,
is a dream, what is reality, what
yeah,
is complete stage production. Because like if I remember correctly, some of the beginning scenes, like they do show you the camera, they do show you her on stage. And like a lot of the framing in those initial hospital scenes seems just like a chamber play. It seems like we just rented a wall and
yeah.
like, we just put a desk in front of
It
here and
was
she,
made during quarantine. Yeah,
yeah, pretty much that.
yeah,
And so like I don't know if the two women are the same person. I know that their identities constantly meld. So like when the husband comes and he mistakes Alma for Elizabeth and then proceeds to have sex with her, like
mm.
it's something that like you as an audience member can say like I can see the clear definition of this is Alma, this is Elizabeth, but like scratching my head because I don't know why this man is having
Yeah.
sex with her.
Well, that's something I every time I watch it, I always have like my mind's like, oh well, maybe this is different now, and like it shifts all the time. And this go round where I was actually not high watching it because I usually watch this movie high off my ass, and I saw it in at Film Forum in New York City when they were doing like a Bergman retrospective, and um I was with a friend who had never seen it before, and we like chatted a little bit afterwards. But this time around, I kind of saw it as Alma was actually like BB Anderson was actually Elizabeth, and that's why she leaves at the end. And I feel like she is a nurse at the hospital who is who has a friendship with this doctor, and the doctor's like, go and get your shit together at my house and go hang out and stuff. And because she also the doctor has this monologue before they go off together about like, you know what, you're playing these parts, blah blah blah, but you'll grow out of it and you'll leave it like you've left your parts in the past. And for me, that was kind of talking about just as people throughout your lives, you play different parts, and the typical like wear a mask, that kind of shit, where it's like you become different people and you evolve and change along the way. And I feel like this was a thing where the doctor was like, you know what, you're having this moment, this break, this whatever the hell's going on with you, and I think you need to get it figured out, so go spend some time together. And for me, this is Elizabeth, who is actually BB Anderson, the nurse, is going to reflect on some kind of I don't know if this is a thing that she maybe met through a different patient and has reflected on her past experiences, and maybe her recent experiences with a patient that had similarities with their lives. Maybe this patient had a trauma dump on her and maybe saw a correlation between the two, and is now reflecting on her own past experiences of either the things going on with her husband and whether her story is the one that happened with her having sex with those two boys on the beach, where she has like that story and then gets pregnant but doesn't know if that's it and has the abortion. So it's like, did she have the abortion or did she actually have the kid and regret having the child, and trying to decide what story is hers. And it kind of seemed like this thing where these two women were kind of sharing these emotional and intense experiences as women and reflecting those kind of experiences onto each other. And somehow this affected the nurse in a certain way. This is my own theory that I kind of pieced together as I was watching it this time. And because you see her leaving at the end by herself as like the nurse, where you see this like moment where Liv Ullmann's character, Elizabeth, is packing stuff away. And that was kind of what I saw as like her almost packing away that identity or that moment of crisis and just packing that away. And whether that is something that she finally grew comfortable with, or she's just literally like compartmentalizing it and throwing it aside, like some people do with their trauma, up for debate. So, because then after she packs away, she just disappears. And then Alma or Elizabeth, whatever, leaves as the nurse. So that was what I got from it, especially with the character of Elizabeth being an actress and kind of toying around with different parts. It seemed like that was a part of her that she almost like made up in her mind to justify all these different experiences in her life. It kind of reminded me of The Other Side of Underneath by Jane Arden, which is another kind. You saw that, right?
I did not. I'm waiting
Okay.
for Blu-ray to come out, which is why I
Yeah.
sent it to you, because you kept on posting on Instagram about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited because I have the the BFI copy of it, and but I am curious to see what they do differently with the new version. But it's also, I hate that it came in a box set because I just kind of want it by itself, but I think I'll just end up getting the box set anyways. But it's Severin Films, so look out for that. But that one is another film that's similar to this, where you think that it could be perceived in different ways. But for me, it was a woman who has multiple personalities, and it's like she puts her like trauma in different kind of identities throughout her mind. And it's also about like schizophrenia possibly. But this kind of, after watching that too, it kind of brought me back to Persona, and be like, maybe this is similar in that way. And maybe Jane Arden was actually inspired by Bergman, because I can kind of see different ways about that. But this is literally just the shit that I have thrown around in my mind. So I don't know. This is, yeah.
But I would say that there are traces of that, and like, not to make a parallel to this movie, but I do love this movie. The TV movie Sybil with Sally Field, a lot of those selves that she had were played by different people that resemble the different person that was. So like, if it was a child, it was played by a child. Yeah, it's an intense Sally Field performance in that movie. But
I've heard,
Sybil has since been debunked because it was brought to light, like the therapist had convinced this very hysterical woman to take on different personalities. So she was like very open to suggestions. So the therapist was just like, "Oh, you do have multiple personalities." And the woman was like, "Okay, yes, I have multiple personalities." So
that's an even crazier story of just like this doctor manipulating this woman into believing that she's nuts. Holy shit. Okay.
But similar to this movie, there are traces, because like the whole, if we're to go along that line of thinking, this idea that the movie is called Persona, that you can put on these different selves or this different identity, and if it's internalized specifically within this like hermetically sealed, localized location on an island, like there's nobody else interrupting the situation. It's just these two women in a house, on a beach, sometimes maybe in a forest, but like they're localized to that specific area, and only occasionally will they have an intruder with that one encounter and in the beginning of the movie. But we see this constant like two people entwined and like the famous imagery is just of the two of them with her pulling back her hair. And it's such an evocative image because like I didn't notice that they do have very similar features, albeit that BB Anderson has shorter hair. But like at one point, like Bergman even spells it for you, where he just has the two images, the two halves of the women, just like superimposed on each
which
other.
Is terrifying. Like it's weirdly like scary, and then you have like that in the background. But like it's so strange because there is a moment when they're like, it's the, I think the moment when they're both delivering the monologue about the I had a child, and or it's Alma who's delivering it as Elizabeth, or like speaking of Elizabeth's experience and saying like, yeah, and they zoom in on both their faces, because which I think is a really cool scene where they do the same monologue but from each person's perspective, like one after the other. And there's a moment before they join their faces, you can see there's like a part of one side is like shadowed, and you can see almost like they look very similar. And it is a weird moment where I hadn't really noticed it too much until it started, like the shadows kind of distorted it in a way where it's like this could be almost either one of them. And then when they combine their faces, it's this really terrifying image, but also like you could see just how similar they are. And I just think that's wild. And there's a lot of just images from it that I find absolutely just crazy.
Yeah, and like there's a reason why Bergman is such a huge influence on people, because like he's not just throwing these images on screen, but he has a purpose for everything that he's doing, albeit I don't completely understand all the time what he's doing. And I'm sure like there are times where you're like, I don't know what the hell this man is doing, but sure. But like I mean, this man like became a parody of himself after a while, where it's just like, I don't know if you ever saw French and Saunders had a parody where it was just like them in black and white on this bleak island. At one point, Jennifer Saunders was like, "Oh no, Christ is coming," and she just lays on the table and is just like flailing.
No, you have to send me that if you can find it. That'd be great.
It's brilliant, but like
it has been parodied a lot though in general, and like influenced tons of movies, like even like Three Women, Mulholland Drive, I would say even like Lost Highway, Inland Empire, David Lynch in general. And I think the most recent, what was it, that Soho movie?
Oh, Last Night in Soho.
I haven't seen
opinions,
it, but I've heard many opinions about it. And my roommate wants me to watch it badly and just be like, I just want to watch you watch it because I feel like you'll hate it as much as I did. But I also found it funny because Edgar Wright, who directed that, he had a special feature on the Persona Blu-ray, I guess, where he's talking about Persona, and it's like, oh, you were clearly influenced by Bergman. But yeah, and there have been like parodies, like even in cartoons where like kids wouldn't even understand. There's been all kinds of different parodies on it. So
I mean, when you have a Seventh Seal death-like figure in a Bill and Ted movie, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, and his and it's weird because, you know, Bergman also was, you know, a theater director, and you can see that in his films as well, where they are, you know, heightened emotions and really intense. And even like you were saying, this kind of feels like a chamber piece, and it's like it feels like a theater piece. And a lot of his films feel like that, like Scenes from a Marriage especially, which they've, you know, turned into a play. And I'm a bunch of other ones, I guess, but I'd say probably more of his later work where it does kind of seem like he gets more dialogue heavy, I would say, almost, or theatrical. But
there's this weird trajectory that goes on with certain directors that like I hold in high esteem, where you can see them slowly get more and more, like, I don't want to say nihilistic, but in certain cases nihilistic, but like Robert Bresson, love him so much. His earlier films are so happy.
Yeah.
When you get to L'Argent, it's just like everybody should be dead. Like,
I know, and that was the one I connected to the most because I'm not a Bresson person, but I saw that and I was like, how miserable. This was great.
Yeah,
And
and similarly with Bergman, not that he became more and more miserable, but he really came about at that sweet spot when modernism was becoming in vogue, and like you could have movies that explored certain themes or actually took the time to explore themes. It's kind of the same way that like De Palma, his sweet spot was the 70s and 80s, because like that's the genre, that's the era that really fit him like a glove.
yeah,
With Bergman, like the 50s, 60s, and 70s were that like sweet spot of like being able to explore and have this kind of introspection of these characters, and especially female characters. Because
yeah.
like I don't know what this movie would be if there were two men. Like it would just be homoerotic up the wazoo.
The Lighthouse, I guess. Is that not what it would be? I guess.
Probably. The Lighthouse. Let's talk about that puppy play that was going on
Oh
in that
my
movie.
God. I had my fingers crossed something was going to happen, but
I hold him in high regard because like he's one of my foundational like directors that helped me discover what cinema could be.
yeah,
Wouldn't say he's my favorite of all time,
yeah,
but like Cries and Whispers, man, that's a movie.
yeah,
Persona, like I respect it. It's probably on my like top tier Bergmans,
yeah,
probably not close to the top five, because
yeah,
Through a Glass Darkly, Cries and Whispers, chef's kiss.
yeah, yeah. See, my favorites would probably be Persona, Scenes from a Marriage, and Autumn Sonata. When I watched Scenes from a Marriage, I was like 18, 19, and I hadn't been in a relationship before. I hadn't really been able to explore anything like that in my life until like I got to New York and, was able to be as gay as I could be. But the actually being able to analyze a relationship and a marriage, it really fucked with me because I had never seen anything like it, like except like superficially through my parents, and growing up with like, my mom had like married 4 times and my dad had married a few times, and like seeing their relationship and always being, like a child of divorce, and like seeing these like different relationships and stuff, but also kind of taking myself out of it because I didn't want to see that. Like I didn't want to be near it. And so actually having to like sit there for what, like 5-6 hours, the mini series of Scenes from Marriage, and watching these people like just rip each other apart with the most like intense dialogue. And I was just kind of, I was thrown into a spiral where I was just like, I don't know what to believe. Is love real? Do relationships, are those possible? And now every time I watch that, I watch it every now and again. I try to watch it like almost like every year, like every 2 years, just to like see how I feel about it. And I also have like different things kind of stick out in my mind, especially with my own experiences in relationships that I've had now. And with Autumn Sonata, just like the mother-daughter relationship really hit me terribly, like just between like the relationship I've had with my own mom and the things that they say to each other. His words are like knives to the heart sometimes, where I'm just like, oh, I didn't need to hear that. And that like really fucked with me too. And so those like really intense emotional, just like horrible like deconstructions of like relationships, whether romantic or in the family, they've really had a huge impact on me as I've gotten older. And so those will always be the biggest ones for me. And Cries and Whispers too, just like the siblings with each other and like my relationship with my siblings and stuff. I'll always, I think it's hard to like, I can't imagine myself never being like, oh, I don't like those anymore. I feel like I will always cherish them in some way,
Yeah.
whether I grow in like like different perspectives and stuff. Because you can revisit films and be like, oh, this doesn't really work as well as it did. But I think the themes just continue to carry on no matter the time. So and no matter the characters where they are, like a lot of his characters are like extra bougie, but they still like deal with very personal, intimate relationships, and which can be, I think, felt by anybody. So yeah.
No, and there have only been 2 times in my life that I have had movies where I complete 180 on my opinion on them. The first
Yeah.
was with Vera Chaitalova's Daisies. Like, I saw it a
Oh,
second time. The first time I hated that movie. I was just like, it's two women just bouncing around for 60 minutes.
that's
Like,
how I felt when I watched
and
it.
then I rewatched it. I was like, there's so much more going on in this movie that I
Okay.
didn't realize. But
Yeah.
like, the other one was Tom Hooper's Cats, and let me tell you,
I'm gonna end the meeting a little early. No, it's okay.
the first time I watched it, I felt I was alone and I was viscerally just like, I feel like I'm getting assaulted by this movie. I
Oh
feel
my
like
god.
it's attacking me physically. And
It's
then I
just
watched it
bruised.
with some friends a second time, and I was like, oh, this is how it's meant to be watched. Like, with friends where you're not even paying attention, you're just talking over it.
Yeah.
So
Oh
like
my god.
with Bergman, I don't think that I mean, I've definitely had some weird experiences with him. I think, what was it, like All These Women? I didn't think it was that funny of a movie. But like on
Okay.
the whole, there are good movies. There are some like mediocre movies. Didn't care
Yeah.
for Serpent's Egg or whatever.
I haven't seen that. I've only seen like maybe 17 or 18 of his movies, and he has like a billion. And I have like the Criterion Collection box set, and I'm like, okay, so I need to do a deep dive of this soon, but I also don't want to kill myself. So I'm like, maybe I should stretch that out here and there. So I'm gonna try to do that. But yeah, I would say the one I would say, which is kind of, I guess, sacrilegious. My least favorite I remember sitting through was The Virgin Spring, and it was because I didn't care for, it's Harriet Anderson, right? I think she's
No,
the, or
not in that one. I forget who the actress is that gets killed,
okay,
but
but she was doing way too much for me, where I was like, I can't do this. And that's kind of how I felt when I first watched Cries and Whispers, where they have those like moments of the like zoom in on the face, and they're like, and that was just like, chill. But then things became a little bit more clear as I watched it when I was older, and I've seen it several times now. But I've been afraid to revisit Virgin Spring, and I was like, I'll just watch Last House on the Left. Isn't that the same movie?
I
So
will say, if you rewatch Virgin Spring, I
yeah,
completely forgot because I saw it the first time when I was in college, and then I rewatched it when they were having the Bergman Centennial.
yeah.
I forgot Max von Sydow shows his booty cheeks, and it is a lovely sight.
Well, now I'll watch that tonight. Because
He's just like standing there taking a bath.
beautiful. I mean, that's enough for me. I was all with him, especially. I had always just growing up, I knew him as like the old guy from The Exorcist, and then I didn't realize he was in so many Bergman films. So then I was like, oh, he's in a lot of this shit. I was like, he's great. I was like, he's actually fantastic. I just thought he was like, for some reason, was just like, oh, he's a Hollywood guy. He's like, no, he's like a Swedish guy, and he's been in a lot of great films, and especially like The Immigrants in the New Land, which is, was it John Troell,
Yeah.
not Bergman, but, and Lee Volman's in that as well, and they're both fucking incredible.
And when you realize in The Exorcist, he was in his like 40s, I believe.
Yeah,
And like they
that's
just put heavy makeup on him
that's
to
the
make it.
thing. When I had found out like about that specifically like several years back, I was like, how is he not dead yet? Like, and I was like, he was old as fuck in the past. And I was like, oh, they literally just threw makeup on him, which I thought was a strange choice, but they were like, we want this guy specifically because he's great. So made sense. But now before we like wrap up on Persona, I was gonna say, okay, so I would say out of the like performances from these, like from Liv Ullmann and BB Anderson, is this, what would you say would your like famous or your favorite performances of the two of them? Because I know they've been in several things, but
My favorite performances outside of this, I
yeah,
would say that of Liv Ullmann, probably in Cries and Whispers. I thought that she was great.
yeah,
Of BB Anderson, trying to remember. I loved her in Wild Strawberries.
yeah, she's really sweet.
I liked her kind of like side character in Seventh Seal.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I would say that in Scenes from a Marriage, that was probably like her top-notch performance.
my
Like
favorite.
it's
It's
on
my
par
favorite.
it's on par with Persona, where it's
Yeah.
just like she's doing so much because she's like able to tap into those emotions.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, not to go the Sydney Sweeney route from Euphoria, where it's just like pretty people have problems because
Yeah.
they're just pretty and they can't act, but like BB Anderson can act. And
Yeah.
like when you see that clip of her on Dick Cavett with Ingmar Bergman and she's just explaining like it's fascinating to watch because like like you tend to just think of these people in relation to the fashion that they have. And so like in Persona, you just kind of think of her with that sleek haircut and those fashionable glasses, similar
Yeah.
with an Audrey Hepburn, where they just kind of become a fashion icon rather than like thinking about their acting chops. But man, when she's given the right role, she's given the right role and she attacks it.
Yeah, that's the scenes from a marriage. I always when anyone brings it up, the thing I always remember is the scene with her, and like just the fact that they're having that dinner party and ripping each other apart, like verbally and mentally and stuff. And I always have that image of her with the cigarette and then the ash that's just like almost like Shelley Duvall in The Shining, where she's like, I'm just like ash the cigarette, but she's so just like, and it's the most like fantastic thing. I'm obsessed with her. And so like even in this too, she's great. I love that they beat the shit out of each other in the movie. I think it's fantastic. That's another thing is I love how there's that great moment in Persona where they're starting to kind of butt heads, and she almost grabs the boiling water and like is about to throw it on her, and then finally Liv Ullmann's character's like, no, don't. It's like, oh, see, that's what fear is. That's what that is. And she's like, you felt like you were fucking scared, weren't you? And I was like, that's genius. I was like, she's a fucking bitch. This is great. I was so happy with that. Because she like unhinges very quickly, and but you also kind of see it just like it makes complete sense for the character too, because I don't, she's just wild, and I thought that was great. She sticks out so much in that movie, and I love her. But yeah, I'm so glad. I love that movie so much, so I'm just glad we got to like chat about it. But now we will move on to good old Mondo Trasho. And before we get into that, I guess talk about how I guess John Waters and how that kind of started for you, his work.
So I have John Waters on my skin.
Oh, good.
And so I had initially heard about him in, I believe it was middle school. My aunt, my one liberal aunt, because all of my family is mostly conservative. My one liberal aunt, she was always telling me like, oh yeah, just like Divine trying to get those cha-cha heels. And as a kid, I was just like, what are you talking about? And she was like, haven't you seen Female Trouble? And she described the entire movie to me. I was like, I want to see this movie.
Yeah.
So she brought it over and I watched it and I was just like, something unlocked that day. And when my mom was alive, she would always tell me like Angie was the one that made you gay. And I was like, no, penises were the thing that made me
yeah, that was the big one. She came in second place.
Yeah. But like it was introduced to John Waters that way. And then I just started like going through his filmography. And obviously there are things that aren't available, but Mondo Trasho and Multiple Maniacs, my aunt bought the VHSs that were the only like released versions of them.
Yeah.
So we watched those, had a fun old time. And my entry point whenever I have friends that haven't watched them is always Female Trouble, because no matter what, they always love that movie and how bizarre and insane it is.
Yeah, it's a wild little movie, which is funny because I hadn't done a deep kind of dive into his work until I think last year. I was like, I'm gonna finally, because I had seen Hairspray, and I had seen what was the other one? Cecil B. Demented just a few years back, and Serial Mom. Those are like the three that I saw. But the first time I ever knew about John Waters was when A Dirty Shame came out, which I've never seen. But I remember when it came out because I thought Johnny Knoxville was super cute, and I was like, oh, he might get nude in it. And that was like, young me being like, yeah. But I still have not seen it. I don't know if I should. I haven't heard that it's like,
It's okay.
Yeah.
I would say like more so it's an oddity. It's not one of his best films, but like there are some interesting things going on there. Just Selma Blair with giant boobs watching the red shoes and like
Oh Christ. Okay. I'll
it's
I'll
just
have to try it at some point. I see, and I feel like I took a weird route when watching his movies because sorry, 1 second. My dog was adjusting. Okay. Uh I I had seen, I guess, some of his later work, and I wish I had watched some of his earlier work to prepare me for the later work. So now I want to revisit the stuff that I had already seen because I feel like I might have more of appreciation for it now, which after seeing Mondo Trasho, I would say it's, despite me not being like fully on board with like where the story I guess goes, I think it is his more, I think as a film I thought it was the most exciting just because, you know, there's barely any dialogue and it's mostly rock and roll music. But before getting into it fully, if you want to, do you want to talk about what is Mondo Trasho about?
okay. So Mary Vivian Pierce plays a woman who I don't know if she has a name, but
Oh,
we'll just call her Mary Vivian Pierce. She
okay.
goes on a bus, goes to a park, gets her feet licked, and then the trucker like leaves and she's all distressed, walks into the middle of the road, and Divine, after imagining a naked man in the road, hits Mary Vivian Pierce and goes on a quest to get her help.
Stuffs her in the back of the car. It's fucking wild. And yeah, that's, I mean, that is the plot. It literally just, and then shit just happens. There's like not even like none of it, it's hard to like even make sense of like why and what, but which I think that makes it the most exciting. But um yeah, Divine is the star of it for me just because even when she pops up, she immediately, her presence is just otherworldly. Like it's just the outfits, the confidence, the hair, the fucking cigarette, the chewing of the gum is literally just fantastic. And her in the car where she's noticing the she notices like a hitchhiker and fully clothed, and then there's like little edits where it's like then he has like no shirt and then no clothes at all, and it's just like a bare ass dude on the street that ooh driving the car, and then hits, you know.
Her whole reaction to that scene, because like they just keep on showing the clothes coming off, and then when they finally do that reveal, and I'm gonna try and do my best, but she's just like
Yes.
like Divine knew the thing that outsiders of like John Waters film lovers don't understand is like Divine was a professional in all sense of the terms as an actress. Like she knew her lines, she knew how to deliver her lines, she knew where her mark was. She wanted to get things done in like one take. And Edith Massey always frustrated her because Edith Massey could not remember lines and would screw up takes. And
Not
like
shocking, not shocking.
but Divine like always gave her best, and like there's a reason why they kind of categorized her as a drag terrorist or like Godzilla in drag, because
Yeah,
like she had a towering presence. Like no matter what she was doing, she made sure that she was the focus of the scene. And like
yeah.
even with Hairspray, um, I heard a Q&A with Ricky Lake, and Ricky Lake said, yeah, Divine was upset that she didn't get cast as Tracy Turnblad and I got cast as, and it's just like, Divine, you are
Yeah.
you are a aged man, like you're not getting cast as Tracy Turnblad.
Would I have loved to see that? Absolutely. I think that would have been fucking hilarious. Honestly, I would have probably loved that movie more had that been the case. But she was also great as Edna. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, the very beginning of Mondo Trasho is this woman kind of beat bopping about. Kind of looks like just trying to, I guess, convey that sex idol of like the 60s, but also some of the 50s, has like a Marilyn Monroe somewhat kind of vibe, but
She's
definitely.
she's like a cross between Marilyn Monroe hair and like Betty Boop makeup.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and has definitely the way she carries herself is very not that. So and she's kind of like schlumpy and like just kind of looks like yeah, well, it's Baltimore and it's like in the when was this? Like early 60s or
This would have
oh no,
been like,
it would have been later, right? Because I remember there was a song from like Janis Joplin.
yeah, I think it was like late 60s.
Okay.
If I remember, Multiple Maniacs was tail end of the 60s.
Okay. Yeah, and this was like his like debut like feature length film, right?
Well, I think Roman Candles was feature length, but
Okay.
like there was something. This might have been like his first 35 millimeter.
Okay, yeah. And
But
yeah,
yeah,
the music, the thing that I loved about this is that there's barely any dialogue, and when it is, it doesn't really sync up with how it's, you know, being said or conveyed on screen. It's just like having like just like this was it ADR thing over,
yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
You
And
mean like the whole Virgin Mary
oh,
appearing in
Mary,
Divine?
mother, yes, praise you. Yeah, that whole thing is just fantastic, and that's like one of the few moments where there is, like a bit of dialogue, from what I remember, and the rest of
If
it is mostly rock music, and
if I remember correctly, there are four moments.
okay,
So it's the Virgin Mary scene, the scene where they're checking into the hospital and the lady keeps on asking, "What's your name?" And she's like, "My name is Divine. It's
yes,
Divine." And then there's the scene where the paparazzi come and start taking her picture and they're like, "Miss Divine, who are you?"
yes,
Who's the
okay,
lady? And then the final scene, my favorite scene, Mink Stole and that old woman just like commenting
oh,
on Mary
so great.
Vivian Pierce.
Just the amount of just like it's like what was it
It
they
was
just
just
said like
like, oh, she must
maybe
be
a
one of the
dyke.
lesbians.
Yeah,
She's one of them yippies.
yeah, a runaway, a shit kicker, just like over and over, just all kinds of words. And I just thought that was so fucking funny. But but going back where she's like getting on the bus at the very beginning and just kind of traveling around, the music kind of it changes so much throughout the movie, which I think is great. And it goes with whatever is happening in the scene or whatever character is being introduced in some way or another. It like correlates with what's happening, but it's so fast. Like there's just a constant shift of music, like just whatever is going on. And I found that so exciting to be like, oh, what's this song? Like, how does this go with the scene? And I, I absolutely just love that. And then they had, which, okay, this is embarrassing on my part. But the song that goes, oh no, oh no,
You
no, no, no.
know it from TikToks.
I I was like, oh my God, I'm a baby, which made me feel good because I'm like young, but like I was like, oh, I'm ignorant too. So that makes sense. So I was like, I had no idea that that's
I
what
had
that was.
I had the reverse because I saw this years and years ago. And
Yeah.
so when that TikTok trend started, I was just like, Mondo Trasho.
Yes.
Who discovered this song?
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. And there was some other song I wrote down like notes and stuff, but I can't remember what the other song was. But just like the music in general, I was like this. I remember like halfway through, I was like, this soundtrack is brilliant. I was like, I could just like have this on, just like in the
Yeah, like
background.
he literally just took out his vinyl collection and just started playing stuff to create the soundtrack. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, when you have Mary Vivian Pierce just like walking wildly in the woods and you hear Maria Callas playing,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's just so weird. And then you have Divine with like a Mae West
Oh
dialogue that
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I, it's and
Why?
that's the sad thing about this movie is that like the music is what's keeping it from being distributed like
I
publicly.
know I read about that where it was like it would cost like over $1 million just to secure the rights to all the music. So that's why it's just like available for you to watch. And I'm like, it'd be great to see like some sort of restoration of this, but it's like that's a very difficult thing to
I feel
do, I
like
guess.
I asked him once in person when he had a signing, and
Oh.
I was just like, "Would you ever do a Kickstarter?" And he's like, "No, like if I can have enough money to buy a house, I don't feel good like asking people to pay for the rights to my movie."
Oh, well,
And it's
that's nice.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, it's just like we're willing to give you like, have you
Yeah,
seen
but
the
also
line of
fucking
fans
do
that
it.
are outside? Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah, I
will
was
give
like,
money.
yeah, I would love that. Like because this is I think out of the films I've seen of his, this one I thought was just the most exciting, which was is very strange. I thought the idea with just having the music almost narrate the entire thing was great. And
Yeah, and the strange thing about him is that, I mean, the many strange things about him, but like he has said he doesn't care for this movie and that it should have just been 10 minutes.
oh
Like,
my god. Well, there's one scene I'm like, you could have made this a lot shorter, and it's that bitch dancing on the fucking thing with her tits
oh,
out at the mental hospital.
Nicole when she, yeah,
I
yeah,
was
that was,
like, this is going on way too long. I was like, I get it, but I was like, oh my god, and it's just her like doing the same move over and over again. And I was just like, all right. But I was like, it's cute, it's fun. Also, he loves killing chickens on screen. I mean that's the opening shot is this like executioner just killing chickens at this like little river and throwing them into the dirt, which I was
well, I
like,
mean, thematically, it does lead into what eventually happens to Mary Vivian Pierce's feet, but you know,
yeah, yeah, which is another thing. Okay, we get the little monster chicken feet attached to her because and so which it also reminded me of like kind of like what happens with Divine at the end anyways, kind of just like surrounded by pigs and mud and just dies, and then kind of like the chickens being thrown in the mud and dead. So I was just like, oh, she just wanted to be divine. So
also whoever did the audio for the pigs was
I
that
did
was
the just like over. I was like, oh my god. And she's just like in the mud. It's like, oh my god. Um, I loved the idea with the Cinderella sort of crossover where she's getting her feet molested by the dude in the woods, and in her mind she's having this Cinderella moment of like with her wicked stepsisters and stuff like that while she's having her feet licked, and the whole time she's like, oh, 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 like just like over and over again while this is going. And I just thought that was kind of funny where she's having this Cinderella foot fantasy while also being
yeah, and the whole reveal of her like Cinderella fantasy when her sisters are just like ripping off her garments, and then they
yeah.
finally put the shoe on her. And this was a running joke between my aunt and me, is just like Mary Vivian Pierce's reaction shots when the smoke would fill up and she'd be in a different dress and she'd just be like,
Yes, I know that. That's so strange. Wait,
it,
how old were you when you watched this? How old again?
I would have been, I think, a eighth grade or ninth grade, so I would have been
Like
relative.
13, 14.
Yeah,
I love how your aunt was like, this is the time for John Waters.
yeah, and my family still says that they didn't know I was gay, so I don't.
I don't know.
More power to you. I definitely knew I was gay, but
Yeah.
that's your cross to bear.
Oh my god. So how do you feel like what's the because he uses a lot of the same actors too, which I thought was interesting. I had a question. What there was a moment in there I thought was strange when okay, so first of all, this is on YouTube, by the way. This movie is you can just watch it on YouTube. But there was a moment specifically where they're right after the woman gets her chicken feet and Divine, like the cops come in and try to like arrest Divine for hitting the woman and holding up the cabbie like with the switchblade she got from Mother Mary. So um uh there was a moment where like you don't see there's a like something happens with the film where you don't see Divine actually get shot. It's like pauses on this moment, and I was like, is my TV fucked up? And I was like, no, it's the video, I guess. So I don't even see Divine get shot, and I didn't know if that was like just how it was uploaded or if that's like a scene that just was not actually in it. I didn't know if you had seen something from like the VHS where it was similar, or I was
So if
curious about that.
if I remember correctly, it's I mean, and I don't think that John Waters had the money to like do fake bullets and all that, so it was
Yeah.
probably the direct cut. But I did notice in my rewatch on YouTube where like it would stop, and I would just be like, "Did my internet go out? Like, what's
Yeah.
happening right now?"
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like juxtaposition of shots where it's just like you see a close-up of a gun and then you see somebody like holding on to their side. Like,
yeah, because it was like the police officer had the gun pointed at her, and she had the switchblade, and you like see them like about to go at it, and then it just kind of stops. And then was that a who is the guy in the hospital who, not the doctor, like the crazy doctor or the crazy nurse, but the other guy, was that like a priest or another person who worked there? He ends up getting shot he comes downstairs and gets shot like immediately by the police, I guess. I didn't understand who he was, but I was like, oh, okay.
I don't remember who he was, but I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that it was just a priest.
Yeah, I was like, sure. I didn't know if that was like, I couldn't tell if it was a rosary around his neck or something. But and then when they get into the cab outside, and it's that the one actor, he was in Pink Flamingos and stuff, I can't remember, but there's a moment where he stops the car, goes out, and there's like this schoolgirl, and he runs up to her, and I was like, what are you trying to do? And then he just kind of like stops and goes back into the car. I had no concept of like what was actually happening there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, I mean, it's not the best movie and definitely not the most coherent in terms of what it's doing.
No, but I was like, did I lose something? I just needed to ask because I was very
like there are definitely strands in this movie that just go absolutely no. I mean, the entire her walking onto a bus is just to a graduation march, and then there's things that appear and then don't appear. Like, this movie is done with a lot of editing and rewrites. But at the same time, it's like what I tell my friends about some of the trashy movies that I love, where it's like, if you change any aspect of it, it's not going to be as great or as memorable. It's just going to be mediocre.
That's kind of like what I get with John Waters in general. I'm just like, he's going to do what he wants to do. And I was like, some stuff may not like make sense or anything, but I'm just like, I'm along for the ride because he's going to do some bold ass ridiculous shit. So it doesn't matter, which is great. And I love,
everybody's on board for it, which is the night. I mean, like, Mink Stoll did a Josephine Baker dance for no other reason than like, okay, just put the camera on me and I'll start dancing.
Yeah, and that was a great moment. But I love right before when they're like entering the like mental hospital or whatever, you hear like the Wizard of Oz, like wonderful Wizard of Oz, and they're just like being like carted into the place. I'm like, why?
They're being carted, and what it is that like Mary Vivian Pierce is just comatose in a wheelchair, and Divine has like a butterfly net.
Yes, that was another thing, that they're catching like crazy people on the street with a butterfly net. I was like, that's brilliant. I also love that anytime like Divine is just like, oh, married mother, like why is she showing up to help Divine specifically? Who knows? But she's like asking for help, and then she's like, here's help, a wheelchair. And it's just like, all right. And then a switchblade. I was just like, this is great. And I love how they just like take her away at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Divine also, just she ascended.
And I love the doctor's name is Dr. Coathanger. And the receptionist I love, because right when Divine calls, like, I have someone I'm bringing over, and she's like, all right. And then she like ends up like doing poppers randomly at one moment or something, where she's, and then I was like, there's just constant shit going on. The doctor's doing heroin right before they come in, who is like, he's a sort of like Dr. Satan character, and I don't know why he gives her chicken feet, but why not?
Yeah, and his assistant doctor, she just kind of comes out just like bloody, holding on. If I remember correctly, she's holding onto a saw and just kind of like wipes her hand.
Yeah, yeah, it's so strange. We get to see some pigs humping at the end, but I would say my favorite moment would be the two women at the end. I also thought it strange that they just kind of end it so quickly. I found that so strange, where it's just like she all of a sudden can tap her chicken feet together and bounce around Baltimore, and then ends up with these two women being like, oh, she's a whore, a woman about town, and like stupid shit, and then it's just done.
Yeah, I think that he just didn't know where this movie was going. It was just like, let me just end it.
Yeah, let's just stop here. I mean, it was a great moment to stop on.
Yeah, and because that moment goes on for like 2 minutes of just them just saying anything under the sun. And like,
Yeah.
even if it's not like a derogatory term, it's just like she's one of them beatniks.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Because like
absurd.
anything under the sun, they're just two women just dressed very bougie and just
Yeah.
like waiting for a bus. And then at the end of it, when she disappears, that's the most grotesque act that can happen. And they're just like, oh my God.
Yeah,
They're
let's go
disgusting.
this way. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
I just imagine I just find it so strange to imagine them filming this just like around town. With a budget, I saw that the budget was like $2,100 or something. Just like with
yeah,
nothing, which I think went into the car. Like I think it all went into Divine's car. And that was it. And maybe to buy the chickens.
and
Um,
and I think that they almost got arrested for the hitchhiker being naked because
yeah, I saw that maybe he personally got arrested. And then they like dropped the charges or something, but that's
yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. I was surprised. I think there's like a moment where Divine's just like walking down the street or running or something, and like a cop car I think turns the corner, and I was just like, are we just gonna see her get arrested? And I was like, oh, maybe this is like part of it. I couldn't tell if it was a cop car or a cab, but and then I love her going into the store. At first I was like, oh, she's just like stopping to steal shit for a little bit. Like when she goes after she picks up the person she has, throws her in the car, she like goes to the store and it's just like shopping and then just like
yeah,
steals shit. And I was like, oh, so and then there's a random woman passed out and she steals her shoes. And I was like, oh, she's just like doing that. But she does it to save this poor woman. It
yeah,
brings the woman to the laundromat, spruces her up a bit and throws on some new clothes, which I'm like, that's sweet. I was like, this is the sweetest I've seen Divine in a movie, I think. And she's still like horrible. So
this is
um
why Virgin Mary came down from heaven in order
yeah.
to like have that divine intervention. Like, yeah,
Divine. Yeah. It's very sweet. I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And I think it was because of um the music. I thought that was just an exciting way to do the story. And one last thing, about it, the woman, the main woman who gets hit by the car, in the beginning, she's at the park. What is she feeding the bugs? Is that meat?
I think it
Or,
is.
or
I think it's either deli meat or like ground beef or a
yeah,
sandwich or something. Like
that's
she's
what I thought was genius for some reason, where she's like, you think she's gonna go feed the bird, but she's literally just feeding bugs meat on the ground. I was like, that's fucking hilarious. I thought that was so funny. Yeah. Wait, okay, so what are your favorite John Waters movies? Would you say like maybe Female Trouble?
so female trouble, desperate living, serial mom, Mondo Trasho. Pink Flamingos, like for all of its notoriety, it not that it hasn't aged well, but like the initial shock of it has
Yeah.
subsided after like years of being raised on other
Yeah.
extremes. That like after watching The Human Centipede, my tolerance for like a drag queen eating dog shit is like, okay,
See,
cool.
and even with even with like Pink Flamingos, the scene that disturbed me the most was the chicken scene. Like that thing I was not prepared for, and I was like, oh yeah, she's dog shit. I get it, blah blah. Blah. But like when they're fucking and then like shoving like the chicken around like an actual chicken, I was just like, whoa, like I got one like that kind of like rush of like, oh, I should not be looking at this, and I was not prepared for that. So right when this started with like chicken murder, I was like, oh Christ, here we go again. Because you know what, you can do anything else, you can throw a person off a building, whatever, but if you kill an animal on screen on me, like like it ruins my life. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
No,
I've seen many movies where that happens actually. So
yeah. I mean, Three Colors, the Three Colors Red, the only reason I started crying in that movie was because she hit a dog.
oh
Like
no. Yeah.
it wasn't anything else in the movie that like prompted the tears. It was just the moment she hit that dog and I heard a yelp, I was like, here come the waterworks.
Oh no,
Like
yeah, you can't do that to me. If I watched, there was some stupid shitty fucking movie. Oh, Chaos Walking, the movie no one saw. It has Daisy Ridley and that Spider-Man kid.
I know
Tom
what you're
Holland.
talking. Yeah.
I saw it in theaters right when things were like theaters were starting to open again. I was like, I just want to see an IMAX movie. I need to go and experience that and stuff. So I went because that was the one that was playing. I did not like it. And spoilers, are you going to watch the movie?
I am, but you can spoil it for me. Yeah.
The dog dies. I'm sorry. Just heads up, that is the most intense part of the movie. And because it was the best character in the entire movie, and they got rid of it. And I was like, how fucking dare you? Now I'm not invested in this anymore. And then it was like the rest of the movie had to happen. And I was like, why? The movie's over.
Did you watch Crawl, the giant alligator movie?
Yes, I did. Great.
So
film.
that entire movie, I just kept on thinking, if they kill this dog,
Yeah.
I'm going to murder somebody. And then when it survived, I was like, that was a good move. That was
I know, if a dog like ends up surviving, I'm like, okay, well, at least it had that. Like they had the audacity to keep that. You can wipe off the entire planet, but if that like sole dog is alive, I'm like, kind of like Dogville, where I'm like, great job, you kept the dog. That's great. So, yeah, I'm. I don't know. Any other last words on good old Mondo Trasho?
I would recommend that people watch. Like, I would say that the entryway into John Waters is definitely Female Trouble, and then start exploring some of his other stuff. For the like not faint of heart, go with Hairspray. For the people that can like deal with some subversive stuff, maybe Polyester, Serial Mom. But Mondo Trasho, it's just a hoot and a half if you have the time.
What is the most like disturbing of his, would you say, that like put you in, that like even made you be like, oh Christ, okay? Because I've heard of Polyester and I was thinking about watching it, but I want the scratch card where you can like do the sniff thing.
Well, the Criterion release does have this.
Yeah. I want to see it first.
Yeah. I refuse to scratch that because you know what's going to be sniff, and I don't need to smell that. I wouldn't say that any of his movies disturbed me. I would say probably in Multiple Maniacs, the rape of Lobstora is like, it's not terrible, it's not tame.
Yeah.
I will say the one weird scene is the rosary job, which I don't know if you saw that one, but
this is in Multiple Maniacs.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Multiple Maniacs yet.
So she meets Mink Stoll at a church, and Mink Stoll is this lesbian who wants to get it on, and so she just proceeds to take a rosary and do a rosary job on Divine. So
okay,
while it's intercut with the life of Christ, so you see Edith Massey playing the Virgin Mary, and I believe it's George Figs playing Jesus. So you just see like this procession of Divine having sex with Mink Stoll, and then images of Christ on the crucifix.
That is beautiful. I'll have to watch that immediately then, because I do want to see a few other ones, and Multiple Maniacs and Polyester were the ones I really wanted to see, because I've seen most of the other big ones, and then A Dirty Shame if I'm high on drugs.
Yeah
it's like, it's okay. But also, so if you want to let anyone know where they can follow you, if you care about that, like I know you do stuff on TikTok, and I think those are really interesting videos and stuff that people might actually get a kick out of, if you care to share your identity online.
So you can follow me at Criterion OOP, and yes, it's pronounced Criterion OOP, not Criterion OOP, which people have thought that's what it is. But
I thought that too, and then I was like, oh, it's out of print, right?
Yeah,
great. I was like, that's brilliant, great.
So you can find me anywhere. If you look up Criterion OOP, it's usually me. So Instagram, TikTok. My TikToks, like you were talking about, I've been doing an analysis of a scene every other day. Yesterday I did White Chicks, which I love that movie so much.
Yes. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to talk about both of these, and I'm so glad I got to watch the new John Waters movie, and I'll have to watch more, but hopefully in the future we can do this again, because this is really fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.